All right, hello everyone. It is your favorite time of the week again this week with Retro Reload Podcast. And we aren't going to be talking about things that are a little sketchy this week, but we will be talking about something that's a little bit seedy. So this week we have me, Kyle, and who else do we have here tonight?
Hi, I'm Jeremy.
I'm Tyler.
I am Dash V, although with a little bit of a home makeover. So with me today, we have Brian and Chris from the Seedi project. So, hey, guys.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Howdy. Thank you.
Right. So they're on board. They have a IndieGoGo project for a console that they're working on that addresses the long-standing, issue that we've had of how do we play our legacy, our retro CD-based games. So they're going to be talking to us a bit about the CD, what it is, what's behind it, that kind of thing. We got a whole roster of questions. I don't know if we'll get to all of them. We're going to also be monitoring the chat. So if our friends there in the chat have any questions that they want to ask, feel free to throw them on out. After the show, down in the doodly-doo, we will have a link to the IndieGoGo project if you want to go there to find out more details or be up to date or become a backer of the project. So without further ado, again, welcome you guys. And I guess I'll kick it off with, give us the elevator pitch. Like, what is the CD for folks that haven't seen the IndieGoGo project yet?
Okay. So Seedi is a affordable, small home media center / gaming system, which is built around a optical drive. I'm just going to grab it here. So this is, for scale, what it looks like. And you're able to basically insert PlayStation games, TurboGrafx CD / PC Engine CD games, Neo Geo CD games, and Sega CD games. And using the built-in emulators, it will play them on the fly right off the CD-ROM. In addition to that, it has a bunch of other emulators, so you can play ROMs on it. You can plug in a cartridge adapter, which is an existing product that we didn't make, but it's called a Retrode, and it's fully compatible. So you can, if you have a Retrode, or if you wanted to play Genesis cartridges or other cartridges, you can get a Retrode and plug it in. The onboard storage is a 32 gig SD card. There's tons of options and stuff and other features. I kind of think we almost have too many features, and you can play other media. You can play CD audio. It has Wi-Fi. It has Bluetooth. The other system that's supported is actually DOS. So you could additionally play DOS games. You can copy over DOS games, or you could, if you have a DOS game on CD-ROM, you can put the CD in, and then this will launch basically a DOS emulator as well, and you can play DOS games. So it's like kind of an all-in-one emulation system. And we're using open source emulators to do this. And we're live on IndieGoGo. That was not the short pitch. Sorry.
No,
I'm gonna stop.
That is totally okay. That was it. If it's an elevator going up, a skyscraper, then we'll take it. Yeah, we'll take it. That's totally fine. One of the things I want to kind of ask is the console that you're holding up right now. That's like a fully functional prototype, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So you've got actual hardware in there, and you can plug it in, and it works.
Yep. Yes.
So, folks, this is already way farther along than the Retro VGS or Coleco Chameleon, whatever you want to call it, ever got. Like, there's actual hardware in the case. The case actually exists. It looks pretty nice.
Yeah, and we actually have a series of Facebook Live vids that demonstrate some of its functionality.
Awesome. So now, Chris, I'm going to give you a chance to soapbox for a second. Explain to us your involvement in the project, like how you're contributing.
Sure. Yeah, I'm the mechanical guy / supply chain. So I still consider this as being Brian's baby. So once he had it decently developed, he brought me into the mix, and we make a good partnership. We actually work together at the same company for our day jobs. For the past 7 years, we've been working, developing consumer electronics together. So it's a fitting partnership.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. So, about the hardware, this is available, folks, by the way, on the IndieGoGo website here. So you can actually see this if you go to IndieGoGo.com and you search for Seedi, Seedi. It should pull it right up. I'll have a direct link down in the doodly-doo after the show. But they actually talk a bit about the hardware here, which is also another plus versus the retro VGS, which never could quite get, they couldn't quite figure out, are they going to use an FPGA? Are they not going to use an FPGA? One of the things I thought was really interesting here, and maybe, Chris or Brian, feel free to chime in. This is not a retro Pi in a box, correct?
What exactly do you mean by not a RetroPie in a box?
I guess what I mean is the hardware here looked not like stock RetroPie stuff.
I mean, we're not using Raspberry Pi, nor are we using the RetroPie emulation suite. But I mean, we are using an existing system on a chip board. We did not spin our own board for this. I mean, essentially, we have found different, essentially off-the-shelf parts that you wouldn't expect to necessarily work together, and we found the right combination that they work great together in. So it wasn't just like we could get like these three things and wham all together. Like there was a fair amount of troubleshooting and fiddling around involved to get this to all play nice together.
Yeah. I noticed that for folks that are wondering on the raw specs, according to the IndieGoGo project page, it's a quad-core ARM CPU.
Yep.
With the cores running at 1.2 gigahertz per core. It's got 512 megs of DDR3 RAM, and it's using a Mali 400 GPU. So there's some decent horsepower under the hood there. So hopefully I know one of the things with the Retron 5 is that it was using a Rockwell chipset, and for some of the earlier consoles it was good, but some of the Super Nintendo games, some of the more demanding ones did lose some frames. And it was kind of noticeable when you played that they played at a slower frame rate than they would have on their SNES actual real life counterpart. So with the NES games and Genesis games, it wasn't so obvious. But how much have you guys play tested in terms of like to try to figure out like what speed processor to go with, what chipset to go with? How much did the target platforms play into the hardware that you settled on, or limit the platforms you're able to support based on the hardware?
Yep. Well, I mean, to be honest, where we started was with a way overpowered board. And that was definitely more in the early phases, just trying to see feasibility overall for all the different emulation and the other things that need to be running in the background. So and so that was kind of where we started with. What we started with was like one of the really nice system on a chip systems, and then we kind of slowly worked our way down to find something that was both powerful and cost effective, and that's where we landed on what we have right now. And in the process of doing that, I've definitely collected tons of PS1 games. Several Sega CD games, a bunch of TurboGrafx games, Neo Geo games, and also there's a retro game store actually near where I live. So I've befriended the owner of that place, and I bought a ton of games from there.
Can we get a shout out?
Sure, go ahead.
You can otcgames.com is his website. They actually, the brick and mortar is not currently available for walk-in, but they're running an online shop right now. But when we started doing this, actually going in there a couple of years ago was like one of the main inspirations, because I was just like, wow, look at all this stuff. And at that point in time, CDI was on the list of supported systems, but and I actually bought a bunch of CDI games from that store. But we eventually decided to axe CDI from the starting list, because it just wasn't worth it.
Gotcha. What if I can ask, what kind of things made it not worth it? Was it perceived install base, or was it like licensing of cores, or what kind of knocked it out of the running?
Performance on the board that we wanted to go with, basically. And the amount of fun games that exist on the system, and again, I'm amazed at the level of interest that there is in CDI from people that have been asking, like, well, it's going to support CDI, and it's just like, what games do you actually want to play? Because having fiddled around with it, there's a lot of nifty stuff, but it's like, are we really expecting people to spend time playing CDI games on this?
Yeah, somebody should just remake Hotel Mario on another platform, and then we can all move on.
One of our fans actually have a question right now. Listener Mage wants to know, can you access streaming internet stations with the CD?
So we are going to be using Kodi as basically the front end, which is a lot of people know what Kodi is. But Kodi is like a media center application, and you can download Kodi and install it on Windows and run Kodi, and you can also basically have Kodi be like an appliance type of app that runs on like Android and other Linux boxes. And so almost anything you can do in Kodi, you can run on this, and it runs pretty well.
Cool.
So, for example, like I think YouTube is like there's a native Kodi app, and then you can search. There's a bunch of different like kind of like channels you can basically set up on Kodi.
Nice. So one thing I was wondering, and I noticed you have it in the background there. When I was watching the video on the page, the Lego boxes. Now, is that like a prototype that you had made? A prototype casing with like Legos? Is that actually functionable, or what was that?
Yeah, it's the exact same guts that I have in this prototype in Lego. And actually, we have about 4 of the Lego units that have traveled all around. Those were some of our alpha test units. So I've got one I sent out to a friend in near Seattle. He's got that still, and a couple that other friends have gotten nearby. And I'm actually pretty proud of the Legos. It was a lot of fun doing that. But yeah, basically, you'd be amazed how how much it costs to get like a plastic enclosure built, and especially at scale. So that was like the logical next step for small production was Lego.
I don't know. I think maybe you should offer some Lego edition cases.
Have your own build your own case.
Right? Just add like 3 or 4 CD bays in there.
Yeah, I was looking.
Maybe somebody will just get one. Maybe we'll run out of the other cases and we'll have to scramble.
I didn't see that as a backer.
I'll pay extra for that.
As a backer reward, right? Kind of interesting.
Also for the chat, Jeets and XL said, "Hey guys, I can't wait to see how the CD is going to turn out. I'm super psyched for the TurboGrafx and the PC Engine games."
Awesome.
Go ahead.
Check out. So we did a live demo of PC Engine last week. So if you want to check out some of it in action, you can go to the Facebook page or our YouTube as well. And one of our, I think that was live demo number 2, or I think that was live demo number 3. So you can check out some of that right now.
Nice. I noticed under. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I just had one quick question. You also mentioned, I was wondering, now, the games, when you're playing them through there, since it's going to be going through HDMI, is there going to be like any upscaling or anything like that, or is it just going to be like native resolutions? How's that going to work with it?
I was just going to say that, but you guys go ahead and give it.
Yeah, so the native resolutions that we're supporting are 720p and 1080p. And the games are scaled kind of automatically in the emulator. And the default settings that we have that we think looks best are it's just a bilinear filter over the picture. So it gives it a little bit of a blur, not like the big like Eagle or like Super Psy types of blurs that like really like make it look like cell shaded, but just a slight blur that makes it look a little bit more smooth on the TV. And so that's what the default picture is.
Cool. And will users be able to adjust those settings as well?
Yes. Yeah. You can turn off the bilinear. There are a bunch of other filters you can use as well.
For the PlayStation games, for things like Final Fantasy VII and things like that, I know that some of the emulators would do things with the polygons to kind of like clean them up a bit. And I was surprised when I first played Final Fantasy VII in an emulator over a decade ago. I was shocked at just how detailed the textures were in that and in Final Fantasy IX compared to what you could see on your CRT TV, where everything was kind of blocky, chunky, grainy, versus seeing it. So like, is the picture that we're going to see for a game like Final Fantasy IX, is it going to be more like an upscaled CRT presentation with some blur, or is it going to be more like the kind of refined edges and cleaner textures, or is it going to be something in the middle, or is it configurable by the user?
There are some there's everything is configurable by the user, but the default settings that we're going to have are not using high res modes. Basically that seems to generally result in like more glitching, and our take on that is that it doesn't look, it looks too different than the way that the games kind of like are supposed to look.
Okay.
So the default will be more of like a vanilla picture, but even at that, it looks stellar just due to the straight HDMI picture. Taking the analog video signal out of the picture like really cleans things up a lot, and then with like the slight bilinear filter, it just looks really great.
Nice. Is there gonna be anything additional like CRT, filters, or
like
a faux scanline thing? Yeah, anything like that? Have you considered it? Or
oh yeah, scanline is definitely, like, I'm a big scanline fan, so yeah, scanline. There's a scanline option as well.
Yeah, I think that'll definitely help with the if you are going with closer to the original look. A lot of these games were kind of like the right scanline effect applied on top of it can really give that original look. There's a lot of nuances to some of the graphics that were kind of tuned for there's going to be scan lines, and when you take that away, some stuff reacts not as nicely to it as others. So it's good to know that that'll be an option.
Yep.
So also in terms of storage, I'll get right to you in just a second, Jeremy. I did want to throw out, since we're talking technical stuff, says that there'll be 32 gigs of storage in the way of an included SD card.
Yes.
So I assume that to mean like people could swap that out for their own if they have like a 64 gig card. Do you know what the max size is of a SD card that somebody could put into one of these?
I actually don't know off the top of my head. It may be 32 or it may be 64. But it's the OS for the entire system is also on that same SD card. Mm-hmm. So swapping out, like if you had a bigger SD card, you would need to like initialize it and install the OS onto that first, and then you can use your own SD card. Okay. Because there's not onboard storage on the board itself. It's all running off the SD card.
Okay, interesting. It'd be nice to know, maybe as an update offline, maybe just to kind of know if the SD support is XD SD, or if it's if it's 64 gig and above that's supported, or if it just tops out at 32 to 64 gig. I know with some other devices that I've gotten, I've bought bigger cards, plugged them in, and then they didn't work. It was kind of like a surprise. So. Okay. As a consumer, that'd be a really interesting insight to
definitely, get. Definitely a missing detail that we should have. I'll put that on my homework list.
While he's doing that, Jeremy, go ahead and you had a question?
Yes. Does it come with the controller, and what type of controller are you guys providing if you are giving one?
Depending on the perk that you choose to back us at, you can get a controller that comes with it. It's a third-party remake of the DualShock 3. And we realized that there are a lot of remakes out there and their quality can vary. So we put a lot of work in finding the right supplier and ensuring that we have something that's going to function decently. But if you do have a favorite controller that you like to use, you can also get just the system and bring your own controller.
So we can connect any Bluetooth, like NES Bluetooth, correct?
Yes.
Most Bluetooth, yeah.
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't have mine on hand, but I think what you're talking about is you're talking about the 8-bit DO controllers, right? The SNES Bluetooth and the NES Bluetooth?
Yes, the one you have.
Yeah.
That's why I asked. I knew you had.
Yep. Yeah. So those are supported as well.
So now, is it Bluetooth only, or if I hook in a USB controller through the USB, will that work?
You can also plug in controllers. Yeah. So there is one port for expansion on the back, but you could plug a USB hub into that port, and then you could plug in 4 wired controllers. You could plug in wired Xbox 360 controllers, other retro USB controllers, and stuff like that.
Awesome. So now I have to ask, because definitely not Dash V in the chat wants to know, will the Xbox One controller be supported?
Via, is that Bluetooth?
Via USB.
That can also, I have not personally tested that out, but I mean, the open source packages probably support that, but that can go on that seems like it'd be great for our FAQ.
Okay, interesting. So, folks, just keep in mind, we're not playing Stump the project, the project makers. I'm just trying to make sure. I've seen a lot of people asking. What I'm trying to pull together is all the crazy obscure questions that I've ever seen, like in Retro VGS land and Retron 5 land. I want it to be like, if you're watching the show, hopefully we're asking the hard questions that you guys want to have answered, so that they don't get hit like a billion times with the whole is Xbox One controller supported? Actually, you probably wouldn't get that one a billion times. You might get that one like twice, and both of them would be from me.
Does the original NES controller work with the plug-in?
Retro NES?
Yes. Can I use my NES controller with an NES to USB adapter?
Most likely, yes. Most likely, yes. If it's like a common type of device with like a common type of adapter, then the answer is most likely. Or you can also like map it. There'll be a way to map other controllers on your own.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I'll try to be funny, but you get a good answer.
I assume worst case scenario, right? Like if you plug it in and it's recognized as an HID compliant controller, that you'll have some kind of mapping facility where it says this controller and this port, these settings, right?
Right. Yeah.
So awesome. Yeah. Now, when you do the settings and all that other stuff, do you guys have, if somebody wants to see what the UI looks like, how much of the UI is ready, has been developed? How much of that have you shown off in some of the live streams? Is that pretty close to what you plan to ship, or is that kind of prototype work in progress?
The fancy UI is prototype work in progress, and that's basically we're adding a game library view into Kodi, and then at the same time though, Kodi is adding a bunch of game controller type stuff to it as well. So we'll be using a mix of those things.
Okay. G to the next level says, with regards to the PC Engine, will the CD drive work with games that require the system card or arcade card?
It'll work with all the games.
Lister's mate wants to know if the Atari 2600 controller is supported.
Have not tried that one either. That's an awesome question. If there is a common adapter, if there is an adapter to bring that to USB in the standard controller spec, then I imagine you'd be able to map it out and get it to work.
Lister, this is all I have to say. Please do not rage post all over their Facebook page if it turns out to not work.
I believe there is an adapter because I think I've seen something for the Sega Genesis that uses the same NS.
I
Yeah.
know what you're talking about. I see that.
I don't know if it would work or not.
So on the Sega Genesis subject there, right? So let's get to some of the systems that you are targeting. And before that, though, I want to mention we talked a bit offline, Brian and Chris, right, about the systems that won't be supported, not out of like hate or malice or spite or anything, but just in like, you know, like what you said, what's practical, what's doable. You got to kind of set boundaries somewhere. So far, my understanding of what's not supported, CDI, sorry, Tyler, 3DO,
yep,
Jaguar CD, FM Towns Marty, Apple Bandai Pippin. What other obscure stuff can I pull out? Oh, and
Amiga CD32.
This one might surprise people, so I definitely want to make sure I mention this one. Sega CD games that required the 32X add-on, not supported.
Yes.
So all those things that I just mentioned, CDI, 3DO, Jaguar CD, a whole bunch of other ones that don't really matter, and then Sega CD 32X, not supported. But Sega CD itself is planned to be supported, right?
Yes.
So you want to go ahead and give us the skinny on the systems that you intend to support?
Can you repeat that?
You want to give us a list of the systems that you're targeting to support?
Yep. So again, to repeat, the CD-ROM based systems are PlayStation 1, Sega CD, TurboGrafx CD / PC Engine CD, and Neo Geo CD. And then the asterisk on those systems is that like other emulators, like PC emulators that you might download, or other emulators you might have used in the past, at least as of right now, the user is going to be required to provide their own copy of the BIOS file and copy it over to the system. That step is going to be a painless step technically, but there is that caveat of the system right now. So then, as for other systems, so Sega Genesis, everything else doesn't require a BIOS. So DOS, Sega Genesis, Atari 2600, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advanced, various arcade titles, and TurboGrafx 16 / PC Engine, and NES, and I think that's the main list. And then the other thing is, since it's a totally open system, like the user will be able, or the customer is going to be able to more than likely add in other emulators if they want, or like find other open source projects or programs to pull into it if they want. So like there's kind of like the sky's the limit as well, because it's an open platform.
Cool. If somebody tries to kind of do that kind of stuff and ends up like bricking their console, are you going to have, because it sounds like it's convenient, like the OS and all that other stuff is going to be on a single SD card. Are you going to provide like a site for folks to download like a virgin image, like a oops, I crap my CD,
yes,
image that they can just download and pop in?
Yes, awesome. Absolutely. Yeah, you'll be able to download the whole thing, and then we'll have instructions on how to reflash your SD card.
Nice. Now something that's interesting. I'm glad that you brought up the whole open platform aspect of it, because can we talk a bit about like what's actually under the hood of the UI and all that other stuff? Like how are you pulling off the emulation and getting that stuff together, and are you? I know Retron 5 went and they were doing hardware based stuff for a while. Everything was system on a chip based stuff, and then they moved to emulation with the Retron 5. They were using RetroArch and libretro under the hood, and then there was this whole like major drama thing that kind of like came out where they didn't engage with the developer, and then first they weren't providing the code, but then they did provide the code, and then even though they provided the code, the platform itself isn't open, so even though the code's out there, you can't like redeploy the code. So have you guys, like, what are you guys using? Have you encountered any of this? What's your plans toward it? How do you think you differentiate yourself from these other approaches?
Yep. So it's not using an FPGA. We didn't design our own board or anything like that. Again, we're using an existing system on a chip board, and it's pure software emulation using licensable emulators included in the RetroArch project. So it works the way that program works, basically.
Okay. And so I guess so along those lines, for the anti-TiVoization, you kind of address that with having the system be open. So it's not, even though you're providing like an out-of-box, like it quote unquote just works system and platform, the user can reflash that, change that if they so want to.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you've kept it kind of open. And then I think we talked offline, but I don't think we've mentioned it here on the show. You mentioned that at some point you're even going to be releasing the sources that you've modified.
As per the license that we're of the other software that we're including, that's just the nature of it completely, and we're fully, we fully embrace that. So yeah, the source code will be available on online, most likely on GitHub.
So Tyler, my friend, right? Like if you want to like back this, get one, right? And then use that as the basis to build like, the ultimate CDI machine yourself, right? They can't touch you. You're totally fine.
See, I've already got 2 CDI players. I don't need a third one. So I don't really care if it doesn't support CDI. It would be cool.
But those CDI players, it's not 720p to 1080p with bilinear filtering and optional scan lines. Like,
there's only one way to play CDI.
So let's go over your IndieGoGo. How much are you guys trying to raise? And what are some of the perks?
You want to take this one, Chris?
Our target is $50,000. We're about a quarter of the way there. But we recently discovered that 300 people have added us to their cart, and they just haven't clicked the checkout button. So if all 300 checked out, then we would be we'd be at our goal.
So go ahead.
So then the different perks you can get, I mentioned earlier, you can get it with or without a controller, and we have a special edition retro transparent green console plus stand plus controller. If you're feeling that vibe, you have that option as well.
So now I'm noticing too, in the picture when I click on it, right? Actually, I'm cheating. I'm making it sound like I'm all like insightful and like gleaning all this stuff, but really we talked about it before the show. I'm noticing that the insignias on the CD drive, they're indicating that it's actually DVD and it looks like rewritable. So is that like what you had on hand, or the actual system's going to ship with a rewritable DVD drive?
Yeah, the actual system.
That's what it will ship.
Yeah.
Cool. So explain us a bit about that. I assume it's not just, what is that for? What does one use a rewritable DVD drive on the system for?
So the idea is, in addition to being this game console whole media center, we really believe in the idea of like preserving your collection of media, games. So you can rip games to the console, you can burn copies of your games. Like if you don't have an optical drive and you needed to have one for some reason, like you can basically log into this one remotely, like on a PC or a tablet, and like do drive-based stuff. Say, for example, you had like a CD with like photos from something, you could pop it into CD, and if you wanted to copy those files to like your tablet or something, you could do that basically. Or and then you could also like look at the photos on your TV, but it's like a networked optical drive, basically. Like, you can get like a network hard drive. This is like a network optical drive as well.
That's really awesome. Does it work in the reverse too? Like, for example, from the CD interface, can I actually connect to a media center PC or to a network attached storage device and actually stream my game or my image, say, off of my network attached storage?
Yes. Yeah, you can, and that's also like existing functionality in Kodi, basically.
Okay, cool. So the ability, can I, so does the, so the device itself also enables me to like, I could pop in like my copy of Night Trap and it would like make a backup of my copy of Night Trap?
You'll have the option to do that. So by default, like the behavior is just gonna play the game on the fly, and it'll get started up. It's not gonna ask you questions or anything.
Wow. Did you guys have to code that into the interface, or is that like existing functionality?
That is not existing functionality, but basically the plan is to add some of these things to the menu and then hook those items up to back-end programs that we're going to install in the system.
Cool. You guys are looking to launch when?
Beta December, and then real shipment in March.
Awesome. Now, so for some of the features and stuff that you're talking about in terms of like backing up and things like that, some of the emulators and everything, is the intent that when you ship it, like that is the baked firmware and whatever the level of compatibility it is, that's or whatever the level of capability is, that's what it is? Or do you have plans to release, other incremental firmware updates, or do you think like some features are going to be definite, like locked in launch features, where if you don't have it, it could delay the launch? Or do you think that some of them may be like, this is the basic feature, and then other stuff will be like as it's ready?
That's a really good question. And so I guess we haven't necessarily, we're not like guaranteeing or promising 100% of every feature that we've stated there is going to be in like the 1.0 March delivery. We certainly have over-the-air update and user and downloadable add-on capabilities. So that's going to be something like, so if we do want to do an update, that's totally an option. And I think, we're familiar with the idea of we certainly want to prioritize the most important stuff and then work through that list. And we've estimated all this stuff out. So we've got a plan to do it. But, if it came down to it, we have the ability to leave some things out and then add them back in later on through an update.
Awesome. Chris, I heard that.
But I want to interject here.
Yeah, go ahead.
One thing we are giving ourselves is that beta release. So in December, a dozen or so beta units are going to go out with fairly complete code and the first rev of hardware, the first run off the assembly line. And we're going to collect feedback from everyone and pour that into the real first production release batch shipping in March. So we already have built into the plan one set of revisions to try to get all the details ironed out.
Awesome. That's
that
pretty
March delivery.
That's pretty cool.
Mr. Mates wants to know, can you use headphones or microphones on it?
There's no headphone or microphone input directly on the device. So I guess if you had a Bluetooth microphone, that might be something that also just works in the Linux OS that we have, but no explicit support for features like that at this time.
Also,
I think that's reasonable. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, G said he's looking forward to maybe supporting it, and he wants to do a review on it if he does support it.
Cool.
So he's excited for it. G to the next level. He's been on our show before.
So a fellow YouTuber and fan of ours, and we're mutual fans on Twitter. One of the things I do want to mention to anybody that kind of is watching this, and you guys, I like how you guys actually lay this out on your IndieGoGo. You talk about the risks here, that there's some, you talk about, how you're trying to mitigate some of the risks. You talk about the beta and features and how you're going to prioritize stuff. You also talk about some of the legal issues and some of the research that you've done. I know that in general, some of the stuff, like copying of games, legacy or not, always has that potential. For a while there, when Retron 5 first launched, there was a ton of folks that were like, how in the hell is this even legal at all, right? Like, but here it is, like 2 years later, and they're still going strong. So now, other things that's been interesting is that some of the features that you talk about having do actually exist in the Retro Freak, but interestingly, Retro Freak is only released in overseas. It's never, to this day, it's never released in America, and I don't think that there's a clear cut, like, published reason for why that is. Don't know if that's a legal thing. Don't know if that's a patent thing. What's going on, but the Retro Freak supports TurboGrafx 16 and some of the other systems that you guys are supporting, and supports the ability to actually copy those onto an SD card and things like that. So, but this would be the first console of its kind in the US that's actually got the copy capability, in it. So it will be interesting to see how that goes out. What I'm getting at, folks, is that, like, keep in mind, we've dealt with this with a couple of projects before. Remember that when you're backing a project, you're investing in that project. You're not necessarily buying a product. You guys can feel free to correct me if you think otherwise, but there's lots of stuff that can happen between the time a product is run and launched and the time the development happens to the time that you actually go to market. So I think sometimes folks, they look at a platform like IndieGoGo and they think it's like pre-ordering, right? And whether this is an indie game or an indie, hardware console or whatever. So I just want folks to remember, like they provided a ton of information. Like, your page is I'm scrolling through it right now. Like, there's a good 20 pages worth of information here. You've got a really awesome frequently asked questions, right? So if somebody buys it and then goes, "Oh, wait a minute, CDI is not supported," like they clearly say it's not supported, right? Like, or, "Oh, my Atari controller doesn't work." Like, they never promised that an Atari controller would work, right? Or, "Hey, wait, there were some, there were some, risks related to whether or not, a company would come back and say, 'Hey, I don't want you to do feature X.'" Like, they clearly say, they're going into this with some initial assumptions, but they make it clear what those assumptions are. I also want to point out things like they're in way better shape than Retro VGS was, which, I think the most we ever saw those guys was like a Jaguar shell with someone else's Super Nintendo clone console underneath it, right? That was the closest they ever got to a functional hardware prototype. You actually got something in your hand that actually works. So, and we'll provide some links later. You said you guys have some streams and some videos where people can see you guys with
Yes. Yeah, it'd be awesome if we could put in a link to our Facebook page and our Twitter, and our website and our Instagram. And then the website, which is just cdsystem.com, has links to all these other things. But we've been doing a series of live demos on Facebook, somewhat active on Twitter. Twitter is a lot of fun. There's a lot of people that are really into games, and it's really fun retweeting stuff. And then we've been uploading our other if you're not on Facebook, we've been uploading our other videos from Facebook onto YouTube as well. So
yeah, cool.
Should be available.
Any Chris or Brian, any thoughts or objections to my little disclaimer there?
No, it's good. Nothing's for certain, obviously, but we're trying to be as transparent as possible, and we appreciate everyone who's backed us.
Yeah.
Really
the way they need to look at it, right? Like, it's like, do folks want to invest in you? Do folks have confidence in you that you've done your homework, that what you're putting together looks like a compelling, thing for them? Do they want to invest in the potential and the possibility of something like this existing? That's really what they're backing when they back the project. So, and certainly, if folks were willing to throw their money toward Retro VGS, I mean, they didn't even get like halfway to where you guys are at. So it looks like you guys are already, and they had, people that have been, quote, in the industry for multiple decades.
Yeah. But then there's also there's a lot of competition as well. I mean, I guess Retro VGS, that whole thing happened like a year to 2 years ago, maybe. But I mean, we're up. There's SNES Classic is out. NES Classic is out. There's a bunch of other similar things out, and then the Atari thing is coming out in the future. So there's what's cool for the retro gamer is that it's like a heyday, and there's tons of options. But we wanted. I mean, the whole point behind the CD is to be able to pop in your CD-ROM games. And then then we get excited with all the other cool stuff that we can do on it. But that's really the essence of the product, is that you can, like there was a really special time in the 90s when the CD-ROM games, especially like the first and second generation early ones, were happening. And so this is kind of like a way to go back and play those games again.
We can certainly appreciate that. Tyler, you had some comments?
Yeah, so I was just kind of wondering, so you mentioned earlier the BIOS files. You had to like find those somewhere and then put them in, and that's to play the CD games, right?
Right. Yeah. So in order for the emulators to work, for example, for Neo Geo CD or Sega CD, you'll have to copy a file over to the system.
So I guess my question is, for the people who are buying this who might not know, like, even what a BIOS file is or where to find them, where do you get them from? Is there a place?
That's going to be our challenge, basically, to figure that out. And so we're exploring multiple different ways of doing that. For example, having an app that like helps explain what this is all about, and you have to acknowledge a few things to continue. And then we're exploring some other options as well. And over the past few days, so this actually to us was something that came up when we were in the design phase, and we were like, you know what, everyone that's used an emulator has done this, so it's just not a big deal. And then the feedback we've gotten over the past week is that actually this is going to be a usability issue for lots of different types of people. So that's something we're kind of really trying to focus on right now to come up with the right solution.
Okay, yeah, because if I understand correctly, BIOS files are like copyrighted. Like you can't just give them away, right? I mean, is that so? Yeah, and I guess that's my question, is like, how do you get around that? But you sound like you're already kind of working on that. So
yeah, we're trying to figure out the right solution for that.
Okay, and then the other thing I was wondering, your list of systems that are supported, and you have a list of systems that aren't supported. Is there anything else in the works that's maybe could be supported, like maybe like
CDI?
Sega Saturn? No, I mean just like Sega Saturn, one that's not really yes or no.
Right. Yeah. So I guess I mean being like very optimistic. So the list. So we updated the FAQ, I guess maybe during the weekend, and basically we have a short list of like, here's the things that absolutely are not going to be supported, and that list was like Xbox, PS2, GameCube, Sega Dreamcast / the Dreamcast Media, which is on GD-ROM, and like PSP / UMDs, which was a PSP cartridge.
Yeah.
And then there's a section of stuff which is kind of like feasible that it could be supported at some point. So CDI is in that bucket, Sega Saturn is in that bucket, 3DO is in that bucket, and so we're not making, like, that's the stuff that like it's something could happen where that becomes a possibility. But it's we're not claiming that that's coming soon or anything.
Yeah. Okay. I was curious because there was a few I hadn't seen on either list, so I just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
I think what's challenging is kind of what you mentioned earlier, right? Like, I mean, yes, if I want to sink $1,000 into a gaming rig, right? Like I can buy a high-end machine that can emulate all the way up to, Xbox 360. But if you want to have something in the $100, or $200 and below category, like the options that you have do become, severely more limited just based on the horsepower that you have, right?
Yeah. Definitely. And one of I guess we were talking about the things that other people are doing and setting up, but I mean, it's amazing how much of a competition just RetroPie in and of itself is. Like, I guess I didn't fully wrap my head around the amount of people that have already set up a RetroPie on a Raspberry Pi, and I mean that's an awesome solution, and that's an awesome way to go. One of the main differentiators between that and CD is the kind of like ready to go compact disc gaming functionality.
Yeah, Jeremy, that's a really nice backdrop that you have there. So,
well, thank you.
Yeah, completely unrelated to RetroPie or ROMs or anything like that. Yeah,
that's my copy.
No reason, just slight segue. Go ahead, Tyler.
So there is one other question I had that I don't think we've really touched on this. How much is this thing going to cost? Did I miss that, or did we talk about this yet?
Well, it depends how much you got in your wallet right now.
Right now?
How much can you donate? That's how much it is.
If the price is right, my friend, CDI support can become a possibility. You might get a one-off build in a Lego enclosure, but
hey, that's all right.
You know, and it may or may not just be Legos built around an actual CDI mainboard. But for $900, it can be yours, my friend. No, not to steal their thunder, but so there is, like, if you're talking about, like, right now, if somebody wants to get an IndieGoGo, you know, backer version of these, they've got consoles from 125 plus shipping. That's assuming that you want to get the single player set, which has the system, the wireless controller, and a vertical stand. They still have those available. That's 125 plus shipping. They have also a $110 plus shipping, bring your own controller system. So, which I think is a really good option, because a lot of people, my biggest complaint, honestly, still with the Retron 5 is the controller is awful. Like, it makes me angry that I have to, like, pay 40 to 50 bucks more for the console for this controller that I will never use, right?
Didn't you break one already?
Yes, I've already. One of them came broken, and the other one, like, literally, I took it out and I was like, oh man, if I was to drop this, like, it'd break instantly. I turn around, bump my arm on the table, drop it, and sure enough, it hits the ground and breaks instantly. And I'm like, what the hell? What the literal hell? So I ended up taking it apart. I fixed it, but still, like, it had this clicky controller thing, the buttons, it hurts to hold, like, all these issues with it. So honestly, I just use the 8-bit do controllers, the Super Nintendo remote Bluetooth controller, and I just forget that it ever came with them. But I like that you guys actually give that option. Like, if somebody does have heartburn with the controller, right, or even if the reviews come out and for some reason just people decide this is not the one, you're not forcing people to get it with the controller. You're providing an option. And I think anybody that wants to get this to play PlayStation games and stuff like that, like PlayStation 1, chances are they have a DualShock 3. They probably have a PlayStation 3 already, and they probably have these controllers on hand. So,
and you could also get a wired adapter for a wired DualShock 1 and plug that in as well. That's a really good option as well. We demoed that last night.
So the 2-player CD system, that's $140. They also have you can pay them $2,500, and Chris will give you a lap dance. That may not be
the
true.
Ultimate experience.
The ultimate experience.
Yes.
For my credit card right now.
Change your life.
The lap dance may or may not actually be a bullet item on that. You know, read the fine print on that one. I might have just made that up. So, but no, they do have a few of those. I do want to ask, the controllers that are pictured, are those the third-party controller that you're going to be shipping, or is that like a something that looks like this type deal?
No, those are the samples that we received that we plan to ship with the unit.
Oh, okay. Okay. Those look pretty close to, like, the legit Sony ones, actually.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, these would be compatible with a real PS3 as well. But they just, I mean,
because Roland's right here, so you can see they're pretty close to each other.
Yeah.
And the reason being is that this is just a really good controller that I mean, especially since PlayStation is kind of one of the target systems of CD.
Yeah.
You know, it has the right buttons and the right feel completely. So that's why I went with this one.
So speaking of the right feel, the D-pad on that, is it a mushy D-pad or a clicky D-pad? You know what I'm talking about?
There's a happy middle ground, and that's where I think it fits.
Okay. Okay. In terms of
it always actuates. That's the key. It's not so mushy that you have to jam it down. a higher force than you think you should, but it's not clicky snappy.
Gotcha,
It's a decent
gotcha.
feel.
So it doesn't have the dead zone of, oh, I didn't click it yet.
Right.
Okay, excellent. Well, we will definitely, if/when I get my hands on a unit, I'll definitely give a review. I think G is kind of curious to give one a go too. I do want to ask about the thumbsticks. Are those true analog, or is that some kind of clicky?
Oh, analog.
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Cool. Wow, that kind of looked inappropriate for a moment there. But anyway.
My Chris.
Folks,
Yeah,
Retro Reload, we give you the goods, my friend. We're gonna have to rate this episode MA17. So now, are there any in the way of like disclosures and that kind of stuff? Obviously, I think one of the places that Retron, Hyperkin kind of maybe had some missteps early on with the Retron 5. Clone consoles in general have had this challenge. Systems that try to claim like 100% or near 100% compatibility. Yeah. I think, as an engineer, I know like when I see that, it's marketing speak, right? Like they mean every game they can think of plays, but they can't think of every possible obscure game like does Rez work? Like, I don't know. So Ace Combat.
Amazing game, by the way.
You're saying Rez on Dreamcast? Yeah, that's a great game.
No, definitely not that one. But anyway,
it's an amazing game. I know what you're talking about.
So, are there any games that you just know straight away that like the platform itself is supported, but maybe because of the emulation or because of like weird requirements of the emulation, are there games that you know for a fact like may not work or maybe especially problematic that you just go on to kind of like clear the air now and say, hey, this one we're working on it, but we're not sure, or doesn't work? We know there's not much we can do.
I guess anything that has like a weird peripheral would probably be an issue, but I mean, multi-disc games are in. Last night we did a demo of Vib Ribbon, which you basically swap out the disc with an audio CD-ROM or an audio CD, and it'll like analyze the disc and it'll like generate levels based on the tracks on the CD. So like that works. There's, I mean, they're given the very large amount of games. There's probably stuff that's not going to work, but nothing that nothing like big that is coming to mind right now. So do you have anything that like you think might be in that bucket?
Oh, particularly problematic? I mean, you already covered not going to support 32X. So I think that would be most people's, like for Sega CD. Folks that were kind of hoping for like Sega CD 32X hybrid games, like whether or not that works. But you've been pretty clear, maybe no, not ever, but at least like definitely not for launch, definitely not in the foreseeable future, with the current availability of softwares and that kind of thing and hardware. So more importantly though, probably some of the folks watching the show already know this. I maintain, I co-maintain, it's crowdsourced. And I thank everybody that's contributed and helped out. But I began the unofficial compatibility list for the Retron 5 right now, which has several thousand games entered across all the different systems that they support and counting. And so it was definitely a huge undertaking. Like there's like at one time when we were like super active on it, there's like literally 10 or 12 people like actively like doing stuff. And we had this system where like it was really like software wise, I'm almost embarrassed as an engineer to say how we did it. I just made a Google sheet and gave a bunch of people.
I was going to ask what tools you used.
Yeah, it's super simple, super free, right? Like I wasn't gonna launch a website and pay hosting fees to like do somebody else's QA for them. So but Hyperkin was really cool about it in terms of like advancing me like beta firmwares and all that other stuff to kind of try out and stuff. So a lot of times like when there were games that didn't work or whatever, a lot of what helped them iterate so quickly on being able to kick these out was knowing that like sometimes, right, and I have a feeling you're going to get this problem with the discs too. The discs degrade much more than the cartridges. Cartridges, maybe you have to worry about like the cartridge is dirty, but clean it, blow on it, right, and like try again. So one of the things that we did for Retron 5 was we had the compatibility list, but you couldn't knock something out of the compatibility list unless at least 2 people could verify does not work. And it has to not work in exactly the same way. Like it can't be like, oh, it didn't work here because the graphics were glitchy, but didn't work here because cart not recognized. Like clearly, like if you're running the same firmware, right, and it's on the same hardware revision, there's no technical reason why you should get 2 different errors. It should either work or not work in the same way. So that really kind of helped to kind of weed out some of the things that we found over the course of doing it was you'll find like, come to find out there were different releases of certain games. Even though the game looks exactly the same, there's like a Rev B and a Rev C, and the Rev B acts this way, the Rev C acts that way. Other times you'd notice things like, somebody just had a dirty cartridge and it didn't work. And so when you have 2 other people say, hey, this works, now you can say it's supported. So definitely I would say if you're going to do a compatibility list, try to crowdsource it and see if that's something that you can kind of get going. If you can't do anything better than Google Sheets, maybe take a look at just Google for Retron 5 compatibility list. Feel free to download the sheet and use it as like a template. There's actually built-in macros in there that'll automatically calculate for the platform what the compatibility rating is. So it was always funny watching trolls like say like Retron 5 sucks, like half the games aren't compatible. I'm like, by half you mean like 3%, one of which is like Barney's Hide and Seek. Like if that's the kind of quality game you're really upset doesn't play, I'm sorry. But like find something in the IGN top 100 that doesn't work and then maybe we'll talk, right?
Cool. Yeah.
So it's one of those ways to kind of be, transparent. And I think one of the things too is like if you're using other cores, it may not be fully under your control. Like maybe it's a setting that you can default to on that makes some game work, but maybe in other cases it's like that's not implemented, right? So that's not going to be supported. I think that's one of those cases where, people will invest in the project and be like, it said that it supported Neo Geo, but then when I got, this one particular game, it didn't work. Well, you could say, well, if that's on the compatibility list, then that's one thing. And I understand that some of this stuff's probably not in place yet, but this might be something that you guys can maybe think about having happen, like your beta testers and everything. If they're trying games and saying like, hey, this one works, this one runs great, hey, this one's kind of slow, like you're not going to be able to necessarily prioritize fixing and addressing all of those. And you're going to want to have some way to have this documented other than 50 emails saying this worked, this didn't.
Yeah.
Maybe have them like...
Fully agree with that.
Yeah. Feel free to rip off what I did for Retron 5 and like, not rip off. Feel free to leverage what I did and maybe make your own system. And don't be afraid to ask people, hey, look, if you're betaing, please make sure to update the, at least make sure that you put a handful of the games that you've tried into the compatibility list so that people know what to expect. And so what'd be really cool is when Retron 5 launched, there was no compatibility list until there was actually consoles in people's hands. And the main problem with that was there were, at launch, a lot of IGN top 100 games that did not work that should have. Games like Mega Man X and things like that. If you've got beta consoles going out to people and they can kind of document their findings, maybe the compatibility list only has like 15, 20 games in it per console, but it at least gives people a pretty good idea for like what to expect.
Yep.
So, and you've got a lead time. If you're kicking these out in December and you're planning to, when was the launch? You said somewhere roughly March. That gives you a good 3 months for people to be putting stuff in the compatibility list. And you'll notice one of the things that we did, which is really helpful, is we mentioned the platform, we mentioned the title, what region it was. Oh, good opportunity to mention it's region free. You guys are saying that it's
right. Yeah.
All the consoles are region free. So if you're wondering, is it region lock? Answer's no. But you can mention game, region, console, all this other stuff. But we also put what version of the platform it was. So that might be a thing that you can help out people for. So like, if somebody knows, hey, this isn't compatible, but it wasn't compatible 4 versions ago, now we probably want to go back and try that because we refreshed the emulator versions or address some default setting in a GUI, that kind of thing. And it gives you an idea of what needs to be brought up to date versus what you could pretty much take at face value.
Yeah. Sounds like we have to get a beta unit out to Retro Reload.
Hey, we always like tinkering around with stuff.
Which one of you guys has the most PS1 games?
I don't know, actually. Let me.
I'm about 6. So, I can be much helpful to that.
Are you guessing, or are you going to VGCollect.com? And
I checked the other day. It wasn't many. I'll check right now. Let's see.
I have a small stack. Probably not very many. But...
So let me see. For PlayStation 1, oh, wow, holy cow. I'm glad I didn't just give my guess. I have, for North America, I have 36 PlayStation games.
Yeah, see, I don't have that many.
What am I doing, probably?
Yeah, I got 36 PlayStation games. All the greats, obviously, and then a couple of the more obscure ones.
18.
Yeah, so I've got like all the Final Fantasy games. I've got like a couple of the Need for Speeds, all the Parasite Eves. I've got
17.
The Duke Nukem games, the Resident Evil games.
Do you have Pac-Man World? This is an awesome game. Pac-Man World?
I don't have Pac-Man World, but I do have Arcade Party Pack.
I've got a bunch of weird, crappy games nobody wants. Maybe that would be like the thing to test,
I do have to say I don't have any CDI games. I do have a handful of Sega CD games. I've got Double Switch. I've got Night Trap. What else do I have back there? I've got Heart of the Alien, which is the sequel to Out of This World. In fact, it's the only platform that you can play Heart of the Alien on. It's Sega CD.
How do you not have CDI games?
I
do have those, but they're not supported, Tyler, so it doesn't matter.
Oh, you said you didn't have any.
Doesn't matter.
What was that, Brian?
I have some CDI games. See?
Alien game.
I'm special. See?
I don't have the tennis game. I think the only ones that I have Who Shot Johnny Rock, and I have Burn Cycle.
Burn Cycle.
Mutant Rampage Body Slam. I'm counting the ones that I have that are actually like legit.
Oh, okay. So that burned copy I gave you, you're not counting?
I have someone's backup of Zelda's Adventure that I'm holding on to for them, so that they can play when they come on my CDI when they come over to my house.
Of course.
So yes. I don't think I have a bunch of Sega Saturn games. So if you ever decide that if that ever does become a possibility, that's something I could investigate. And then I think in terms of what you're looking, I've got a ton of. You can see between the Xbox One and the bookshelf there, the CD set in the middle. That's all DOS games.
Oh, sweet.
Oh,
So
cool.
that's things, Super Street Fighter 2,
So
Vigilance,
your best choice.
Descent 2, Prisoner of Ice, all the Tomb Raider games, all that stuff.
The thing about DOS on CD. So again, the DOS was kind of like, oh wow, like this also works, and we were like really excited about it. Basically, the games that require a 386 are good to go, but like things like more intense games like 486 or anything above is probably not going to be run so great. So I mean, like
Gotcha.
Out of This World / Another World runs great. Like Oregon Trail runs great. We were playing Warcraft the other night, and like a lot of older RPGs are good. But like
the original
for example,
Doom run?
well, so there's other options for Original Doom. The Original Doom, I believe, requires a 486. Wolfenstein,
Okay.
I haven't tested, but we should test. But it's just I'm just throwing out there, like you're not gonna be able to run Quake in DOS on CD.
Gotcha.
That's gonna be too much, or like MechWarrior 2 or something like that.
Gotcha. Is that? I don't know if that's explicitly mentioned on the Kickstarter page.
It
Indiegogo
is,
page.
but we
Is it?
probably should make it a little bit more obvious. Like if you control F386, I think we call it out a couple times.
I'm looking. Yeah, let me see. I look for more games, DOS games via CD and DOSBox. That would be under the more games where you mentioned DOS games. That'd be the perfect spot right there to kind of mention it. That way people don't kind of gloss over it. I like that the Scum games are gonna the Scum VM games.
Oh yeah.
Folks that don't know, like Infocom adventure point and click type games, looks like it's gonna support. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. It does say that there's optimized ports of classic games, Doom, Quake, etc. So that means that there is a version of Quake that'll play on there, or is that a typo?
Yes.
Okay.
Which is also open source. Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. You're just saying, like, if they download ID software or if they have ID software on CD and they just try to run it, like Duke Nukem 3D,
DOS.
not going to work.
Yeah.
Quake out of box, those games not going to work. But still, that opens up a lot of potential. Games like Halloween Harry, which later got renamed to Alien Carnage, a really great platformer. So if that worked, that'd be cool. I actually have a copy of that. One Must Fall. Oh, I think that's 486. One Must Fall probably won't work.
That's the fighting game, right?
Yeah. I'm expecting that one probably doesn't work. But other games, Blake Stone maybe might work.
Dig.
What's that?
What about like the Dig and Full Throttle?
The Dig, yeah, those would work best through Scum VM. So yeah, fortunately, a lot of those classic games, even though they might not run great in DOS due to their requirements, there's an alternative, which is Scum VM, which is one of my all-time favorite open source projects.
So now for the Scum VM, is it going to be? Are you mapping the mouse to one of the thumbsticks, or do you like the mouse?
Yeah, well, you could use a mouse, but the default is the thumbstick, and then like clicking, and there's other buttons that can perform some of the other actions.
Okay, cool. I guess the last question, we're going to start wrapping up here because I know it's late and you guys are East Coast. But Tyler just left, man. He's just like, screw this, I'm out of here, totally out. He just had enough with the no CDI support, and he's gone.
Sorry, Tyler.
Just rage. He just raged. Maybe he went out to attack my mailman
again.
With a shotgun or something. But we'll get back to that in a moment. The question I wanted to ask, feeling the answer is yes. Keyboard and mouse supported?
Yes. So you could do wired or Bluetooth, and then there's also a way to use your phone connecting to CD over the network as a keyboard.
Oh, that's pretty interesting. I like that feature. That's pretty cool. So in terms of the USB slots, does it have it has two USBs for mouse and keyboard, or do you need to get some kind of USB hub?
You would need a hub, basically. So we're going to be including an adapter which will provide one USB port, basically. So and you can use that for like charging a controller or using one wired controller. But then if you want to, so if you're going to be plugging in a lot of stuff, you'll want to just get any regular USB hub, and then you'll be good to go.
Okay, excellent. Does anybody else have any questions? I think Kyle, you mentioned that you had something maybe off topic, or did we cover that already?
Oh yeah, I was just wondering, what your guys' kind of like inspirations, I guess, for the project were, as far as like, did you used to do a lot of gaming? Did you see this kind of as a business opportunity with a lot of the independent, even like games and making people's own stuff going on? Just kind of wondering what your inspiration for it was.
So I mean, we're both gamers. We also both have families, so like our amount of gaming time has, I'm sure, decreased significantly over the past five years. But I mean, basically, like love of video games, and then love of making things, and then but I think specifically for this project, though, the idea was like, I'm really into like video game history, and I realized that there was this whole chapter of games that I wasn't really that into when I was, in the 90s. I was more like DOS, and I didn't really live the CD systems in the 90s. And then I just got totally fascinated by it, like maybe about a year ago, just like learning about all the different systems, like the Turbo Duo and like laser discs and like all these different things that kind of came and went. And I was like, okay, I got to start playing some of these games. And so like I borrowed a Sega Saturn from a friend, and like I love Sega Saturn. Sega Saturn is so cool. And then but Sega CD and PlayStation, just so many. And I just realized how many of these like awesome games there were, just like thousands of games. And I was like, well, like, what am I mean, I want to play all these games, I want to collect them, but then like that's going to entail all this other stuff. So then I did, I researched the different options of playing the games, and then it didn't take long before I was like, I could put all this into a box, and then that's kind of where it all started.
Cool. What about you, Chris? What is your inspiration kind of the same or a little bit different, coming from a
little bit
different background?
For me, it's a more general love of making and developing stuff. Like I said before, I'm the mechanical guy, so I made the chassis, a nice cool enclosure. We had a lot of fun with the aesthetic design, coming up with a kind of modern retro look. I also have very fond memories of video games growing up. I was a Nintendo guy, so I never played any of these CD-based systems. So Brian, it's all Brian there. But I have very fond memories of growing up with Nintendo, Super Nintendo, 64, Game Boy. And then I had a Dreamcast emulator, actually, with all the Nintendo ROMs on there. And fond memories in college, playing the old NES games. So just great, positive feelings there. I want to share that with people, and just love of making and developing.
Cool.
That's awesome. So I guess the last question that I'll throw out there is what's next? So I mean, what are your goals for? Let's assume, right? Let's fast forward to the project finishes up. The IndieGoGo project. When's the drop dead date? You said that there are people that are kind of sitting there waiting with like add to cart but haven't checked out yet. Like, when's do or die day?
October 23rd, Sunday. We were talking about this. Is that the Sunday? Yeah, it's 22nd.
Yeah, I think it's the 23rd.
22nd of October.
Yeah. So folks, you got some time, but don't wait till the last minute, right? Like, you don't want it to be like it didn't happen and you're super interested in it, right? And it didn't happen because, if you've got faith in what these guys are doing, you like what's going on. If you're cool with being an early investor, right? And know that there's always some inherent risk there, feel free to, throw some money their way. And, I like the fact that the platform is going to be open. I think, in some ways, what'll be interesting to see is, when you push the platform out there and it is open, there may be things that end up being supported that you never thought were going to get supported, because by yourselves, maybe you couldn't have done it. But, when the devs come out of the woodwork, if there's a, hey, look, out of box, this part just works. What does it take to get the other stuff to just work, right? There's a lot of other people out there that maybe it'll kind of light a fire for them. I know for me, I've got all the equipment. I've got everything needed to make a Raspberry Pi. I've got the enclosure. I've got the SD card. I've got the whole thing. I just need to like sit down, follow some tutorial, and then spend like 4 hours, mapping the controller to like every different system that I want, and then spend another 8 hours complaining about why isn't it working. And then, I think there's some frustration in there, and maybe like tossing an object or something. But it's a lot different when it's like, take it out, plug it in, turn it on. That's pretty challenging to do. So I'm hopeful that you guys can pull it off. It's cool to see that you've actually got stuff like, oh, hey, look at here what's on my desk, right? Hey, look at here of us streaming some stuff from the prototype box. That's really cool. I think that Retro VGS severely underestimated the intelligence level of the people that they were asking for money and the people that they were kind of promoting their stuff to. I think that they radically underestimated the complexity and what they were trying to do. And honestly, it looked to me like when they were trying to raise money, they were literally trying to raise money to do any of the significant amount of work at all. It looks like you guys have done a lot of the homework up front, a lot of the work up front, prototyping and all that other stuff. And that really, it feels like you're really just asking, like, if we got to build these at scale and kick these out, like, what's it take to get there?
Yeah.
So that being the case, let's say the project closes, you get fully funded. And, after the initial batch of these, are you planning to do more? Are you planning to do, have you padded enough in there to be able to like have a, like, do you plan to do this as a launch of a of the platform and of the company? Could there be like a Mark II, Mark III with different hardware down the road and more supported systems, or is this kind of like a one-off?
There's so much stuff. Yeah, there's so much cool stuff we can do, and this we'll just have to see where the interest level is and whether or not we get funded.
Okay, so that's something important for folks to know, right? Because if folks are kind of waiting to see like, oh, okay, I'm not going to fund the project, but I'll buy them at launch. So I guess an important thing to put out there, at launch, are the only ones getting released or ones that were backer rewards? Or will there be some additional like...
We're the one case where it may not be straight us to the backers, we're considering opening up a retail perk. So people who own brick and mortar gaming stores could buy, say, a 10-pack. And then they may exist out there in the world. So we're strongly considering opening that up as an option. But as of right now, the only systems going out are those who backed the system, who backed our project on IndieGoGo. Gotcha.
So you guys are open to possibilities like a build to demand, but the only thing that's a, I don't want to say given, but the thing that is, the most probable outcome of you getting one in your hands, if you're seeing this saying like, I want it, I gotta have it, is back the project. So
exactly.
Gotcha. Okay, that's good to know. Glad I asked that question. So if it's in your cart, just remember, it might be now or never. So, all right. Does anybody else have any questions?
Nope. Coming out though.
All right, cool. Chris and Brian, I want to give you any last chance for anything that you want to have mentioned that maybe is in your FAQ, maybe you're a question that you're getting a lot that we didn't ask but you want to answer, or did we cover everything?
What do you think, Chris?
I just want to say thanks so much for having us on the show. Really appreciate it. Hoping that we get the word out a little bit more, get some momentum back in the project, so we can do some great things.
Awesome.
And we'll definitely get you guys a beta unit.
Awesome.
Cool. You heard it, folks. Now, if it doesn't happen, I'm going to be all like, what happened? Like, what happened?
It may have Legos.
Quick check out.
Guys, like, I'm going to get it. And I'm going to be like, what the hell? Like, it's made of Duplo block. These aren't Legos.
I got Play-Doh.
They gave me a knockoff Lego casing. What the hell?
Made out of Mega Blocks instead of Legos.
Right, Mega Blocks. Right, that's what I was looking for. All right. So thank you guys for being on the show. It's been great. I do want to mention, folks that watched the last show or maybe just saw the clip. Last episode we talked about like how my mailman fended off an attack from a ninja to deliver my Game Informer to me. At least that's the only explanation I can come to for why the hell a Game Informer arrives with a hole cut clear through the entire magazine. But I do want to say, Brian Shea, one of the digital editors for Game Informer, he saw the show, and he hooked me up. He said, "Hey, dude, give me your address. I'm gonna make sure that our company sends you out a replacement." And they totally made good on it. Like 2 days later, at my house was a complete, pristine copy of that episode. Now, that said, I didn't see his tweet until after I'd already stopped by GameStop on my way home, and I showed GameStop what happened to my magazine. And they're like, "Oh, dude," I didn't even have to ask them. They were like, "Oh, dude, just here you go. We got like tons of them." So I want to give a shout out for GameStop and say, thank you very much for, hooking me up with an extra mag. Thank you so much for Brian Shea. He's got an excellent review in this month's episode of Sonic Mania. So if you're still on the fence with that one and wondering if it's worthy of all the hype and good news that it's getting, spoiler alert, it is. He's got a really excellent write-up about why in this month's Game Informer. So thank you to both those guys. And mailmen, watch out, right? Like, ninja attacks apparently are a real thing, but we appreciate you delivering our mail in spite of that. You are true American heroes.
I never got mine. Just saying.
Well, maybe yours did not. Maybe yours was not able to fend off the ninja. So you might want to look in the news to see about a mailman taken out by a ninja. So they probably tried to protect themselves with some inferior magazine. Maybe they use like a Walmart ad or something like that.
That'd be good.
Folks, we appreciate the questions in the chat. If you've got other questions, you know, we're going to be posting the link around. We'll have some link to the project in the doodly-doo, so you can check it out. Feel free to ask your questions. We can relay them off to these guys. Hey, there's a lot of time between now and then, so maybe, I'm not going to hold you guys to it, but maybe we'll have them back on, answer any follow-up questions that came along, or give you a status update on the project when it gets closer to, you know, add it to your cart now or suffer.
Awesome. Yep. Check out our Facebook, check out our Twitter, check out our webpage, YouTube. We're there all over the place, and you can learn more.
And folks, don't forget, if you missed us live, that's okay. You can always catch us on YouTube and on Roku. So this episode will definitely be up there later this week. So if you like us, hate us, don't care, so long as you rate us. So take it easy. See you next Tuesday.
Nice.